Being on the right side. Thursday, Bob sat quietly at his kitchen table, his gaze fixed on a bottle of Miller Lite. He had intentionally purchased just a six-pack, reasoning that if the evening took an unexpected turn, he didn't want to have too much alcohol at hand. The sound of music ceasing upstairs signaled to him that she was almost ready. Thursdays usually found him working late, as it was his wife's night out with friends. His parents would look after their daughter, Casey, giving his wife some much-needed social time with her coworkers. He'd wrap up the week's work, looking forward to an early departure on Friday for more family time. This routine, he had thought, benefited everyone. His schedule became more manageable. His parents cherished their time with Casey, and his wife enjoyed her freedom with friends. But as he listened to the movements upstairs, his mind wandered back to the lunch he had with Vicky the previous Tuesday. Bob pondered the need to step away from work more often, maybe even arrange for sandwich deliveries from that amazing shop. He had chosen a seat with a view of the entrance, and soon enough, he spotted a familiar face entering. He raised his hand slightly to catch her attention. At 31, Vicky was the eldest in his wife's circle of friends and undoubtedly Bob's favorite. Married, like himself, she had a comforting presence that never felt overbearing. He admired her striking dark, wavy hair, her pale complexion, and a graceful demeanor that seemed to capture attention effortlessly. Her husband, Ron, adored her deeply, a sentiment she clearly returned. Even amidst a room full of eyes, she maintained her composure as she approached and took a seat across from him. "I appreciate you meeting me, Bob. I know your schedule is hectic, so taking this time out must have been a challenge," she said, her gaze fixed on his. Bob fumbled for words. No problem, Vicky. Though, I must admit, it feels a bit odd meeting you here without Sharon. I usually don't have lunch with other women. But you mentioned this was about Sharon, so I'm all ears. Is this about her upcoming birthday surprise?" He hadn't expected the sorrowful look that washed over her face at his words, nor the further drop in her expression at the mention of Sharon's birthday. Something was amiss. "This might jeopardize our friendship, but if it helps you save your marriage, I'm willing to take that risk. It's hard for me to say this, but Sharon has been involved with someone else for the past 3 months. Bob couldn't believe what he was hearing. It sounded like a cruel joke, and he told Vicky just that. "I wish it were, Bob, but it's not. Since you started that new project a couple of months ago, Sharon's been out of sorts. At work, she's been irritable, and even during our nights out, she's been unusually quiet. After a few drinks one night, she opened up about feeling neglected and overlooked. She talked about how you both seemed to be just going through the motions of a middle-aged marriage, letting life slip by." Vicky paused to order a Cobb salad and iced tea with lemon as the waiter approached. Bob was struggling to process the idea of Sharon being deceitful. Throughout their 8 years together, he had always believed they were transparent with each other, even in disagreement. He looked at Vicky, needing to know one crucial thing. "Has she been intimate with him?" he asked in a hushed tone. "No, not that I'm aware of, and I think I would know. Sharon's usually quite open, which is why this is so surprising," Vicky said. "You know, every woman I've spoken to has expressed similar sentiments. It's like how men joke about feeling tied down. When Sharon mentioned her feelings, we all empathized and told her she deserved more attention. But that night, my sister was there, and she had a different take." "What does your sister have to do with it?" Bob asked, trying to keep his emotions in check. "My sister, frankly, has always been the more reckless one," Vicky confessed, pausing as the waiter brought her tea and raised an eyebrow at her comment. "Our parents were both unfaithful, each always seeking revenge on the other. When I asked them why they stayed together, they said it was love. That affected my sister and me differently. I saw infidelity as a relationship destroyer, while she saw it as acceptable if there's love. Despite loving her, I think she's misguided. Anyway, she suggested to Sharon that if she wasn't finding romance at home, she might look elsewhere. I disagreed, but my sister's words stuck. At the time, Sharon said she'd never betray you, but I think that conversation left an impression." "Why do you think that?" Bob inquired, his mind racing as he tried to digest the information. Though the details were distressing, he believed in the power of knowledge. "Because not long after, Luke Jonas and his friends showed up at the Red Horse Saloon, where we were hanging out. Sharon insists she didn't invite him, but she had mentioned our plans to try line dancing that evening. It was a fun change having more people join in, but then there was Luke." With a name now in his mind, Bob felt a bit more in control. "Tell me about this Luke guy," Bob said, his voice tinged with anger. Vicky gave a small smile at his tone. "Luke Jonas is known for his advances at the company. He's the type who flirts with any woman who shows the slightest interest. He's not concerned with whether they're married or even their appearance. He just enjoys the pursuit." Sharon initially rebuffed him, but that night, he began to pursue her more aggressively. "She's not shutting him down but instead engaging with him. There's talk that another harassment complaint could cost him his job. She could put a stop to his behavior, but she's not. They've been spending time together, laughing and chatting in the cafeteria. I've tried to discuss it with her, but she gets defensive, insisting they're just friends and that Luke understands her. I even asked if she'd act the same if you were there. She blushed, then got upset, implying you wouldn't notice. After that, I kept my distance but watched them. Things seemed to cool down at work, and I hoped it was over until about 3 weeks ago. As Vicky ate her lunch, Bob sat there, feeling a hollow sensation in his chest. He was bewildered by Sharon's behavior and questioned whether his recent preoccupation with work had contributed to the situation. He pondered over what might have happened in the last 3 weeks. Did he really want to know? They continued their meal in silence. Bob was undoubtedly upset. He understood that Sharon's closeness with this man was inappropriate, yet he could almost rationalize her perspective, wondering if he had been too distracted by his project. Except for not mentioning her flirtatious behavior, she hadn't outright lied to him. There were omissions, but he felt these could be addressed. He resolved to talk to her, hear her side, and insist on distancing from Luke. As long as she was truthful and agreed to keep away from him, he believed they could move past this. He hoped nothing more significant had transpired in the past 3 weeks. So, what happened 3 weeks ago? Can you tell me about it? Bob asked, feeling steadier now, ready to face whatever came next. Vicky's expression was one of empathy. It's tough to hear, Bob. 3 weeks ago, we were at the Red Horse Saloon for line dancing. Luke and his friends joined us. Sharon was drinking more than usual that night. Luke kept buying her drinks. I noticed she was quite affected by the alcohol when we went to the restroom together. She came out holding her underwear in her hand, which she then put in her purse, saying she wanted to feel free. I thought it was just the alcohol talking and tried to get her back to our group. However, later in the evening, things escalated. The line dancing had finished, and a regular jukebox night had begun. Sharon and Luke were dancing very closely, more intimately than appropriate. I saw Sharon slip her underwear into Luke's pocket, and everyone in the bar noticed. There were cheers and shouts. Luke then kissed her very publicly and intensely. One of his friends was even recording it on his phone. I was hoping Sharon would stop it, but she didn't. I'm so sorry, Bob. Bob was stunned, his jaw dropping. He excused himself abruptly, saying he needed the restroom. In the restroom, he tried to compose himself, splashing water on his face and gripping the sink. He recalled that night vividly. Sharon had returned home much later than usual. Vicky had called him, explaining that Sharon was staying over for a while because she'd had too much to drink. Bob had always been grateful for how responsible they were about avoiding drunk driving. He thought a bit of overindulgence was part of the fun of a night out. He also remembered what happened when Sharon finally came home that night. She had been unusually affectionate and intimate with him, which had taken him by surprise. It was a passionate and unexpected moment between them, but now, with this new information, Bob was reevaluating everything, wondering what it all meant. "Oh my God, honey, that was amazing," he exclaimed. "I'm sorry it was so brief, but I want to make it up to you." She chuckled, playfully responding, "Okay, let's see what you've got." He pulled her close for a deep, passionate kiss, tasting a hint of the evening's drinks. He felt it was the least he could do after her affectionate gesture. He then began kissing her neck gently, making her giggle as he did so. Moving down, he showed some attention to her chest before kneeling down. He had learned over their 8 years together that while Sharon might not be overly sensitive in some areas, there were other spots he could focus on to please her. He guided her onto the bed, spreading her legs, and looked up to meet her gaze before lowering his head. "Please, make me feel good," she whispered eagerly, gripping the sheets in anticipation. Instead of immediately focusing on her most sensitive area, he began with kisses on the inside of her thigh, one of her more delicate spots. He could hear her gasp, a sign that she was enjoying it. He then moved his attention slowly upwards, relishing her reactions to his touch. Bob returned to the present moment, his thoughts swirling with anger and betrayal. He wondered if Sharon's affections that night were fueled by thoughts of another man. Trying to calm himself, he splashed more water on his face and dried off before returning to the table where Vicky waited with a sympathetic look. His appetite had vanished. "What else should I know, Vicky?" he asked, desperate for the full picture. "Bob, that's pretty much everything. The recent girls' nights have been more low-key, just wine and small gatherings at Hannah's. Sharon's been acting distant towards Luke at work, even though he's still showing interest. I thought it was over, but I caught them talking quietly yesterday. They stopped as soon as I appeared. I've decided to step back. You needed to know since she's not listening to her friends anymore." As the waiter brought the check, Bob quickly reached for it, already pulling out his credit card. He revealed his plan to observe Sharon and Luke at the Red Horse Saloon, but paused as he noticed Vicky's shocked expression. "What's wrong?" he asked, confused. "Bob, if Sharon is going out this Thursday, it's not with us. Hannah has an early appointment on Friday, and Gail will be out of town." "I'm sorry," she said, reaching out to him with genuine concern. "You can call me or my husband Ron anytime. He's a marriage counselor, so he might be able to help." Bob thanked her, appreciating her honesty and friendship despite the difficult situation. "Thank you, Vicky. I'm not sure what will happen next, but at least now I have some clarity. I really appreciate your help." With that, he signed the credit card slip and left the restaurant, his mind racing with thoughts of what to do next. Wednesday. Today marked a significant milestone in the project Bob had been laboring over. They managed to source pre-manufactured parts from a startup in Harrisburg, potentially cutting the project timeline by 2 months, even accounting for inconsistent transportation logistics. With a couple more strategic phone calls, the plan could be completed well ahead of schedule, saving the military a substantial sum. The financial bonus for Bob was looking as substantial as he had hoped, and the professional recognition attached to his name would be a welcome bonus. Yet, despite these successes, he found himself preoccupied with personal concerns, dreading the thought of returning home to face what he suspected was happening in his personal life. Determined to uncover the truth about the suspected affair, Bob had tried to investigate on his own. He knew he couldn't access Sharon's work email, given the HR monitoring, so he checked her Yahoo Mail instead but found nothing incriminating. He considered the possibility of a separate account but knew he wouldn't find anything without checking their home computer. Bob recognized his limitations with technology. The thought of installing surveillance cameras or setting up voice-activated microphones seemed beyond his expertise. He had a confrontation plan in mind and only wanted enough information to decide how to approach the situation with his marriage. Sharon had already picked up their daughter, Casey, from his parents. She had also persuaded him to bring Chinese food for dinner. When he texted her to ask what she wanted, she replied playfully, hinting that he should already know her preferences after a decade together. In response, Bob couldn't help but add a subtle jab, asking if she was still content with the usual. Her reply came quickly, lightheartedly requesting an extra egg roll. If yesterday's revelation hadn't occurred, Bob would have been delighted to arrive home an hour early to enjoy time with his wife and daughter. Glancing at the clock, he realized that before the project began, this time would have been considered late. It dawned on him that he hadn't been home early on a Friday since the project started. The long hours, coupled with his fatigue and stress at home, made it clear to him how Sharon might feel overlooked. However, he still didn't think that justified her actions. As he entered the house, he noticed Sharon reaching for a wine bottle. He paused to admire her. At 31, she was in the prime of her life, with a figure that he found incredibly attractive. Dressed in casual sweatpants and her hair in a ponytail, she still managed to captivate him with her beauty, especially when she greeted him with a bright smile. But then, he remembered the situation at hand. "I'm so glad you're home, babe. How was work?" Sharon approached him with a warm kiss. "Work was good. We had a major breakthrough with supplies, so we'll likely finish a month ahead of schedule. I know I've been distant with this project and can't share details because it's classified. But I want you to know that you and Casey are my top priorities, and I'll do everything I can to protect our family," he said, searching her eyes for a reaction. Was there a hint of regret or guilt in her expression, or was he just hoping to see something? Bob often found it hard to read people. Known for his straightforwardness, he preferred clear and direct communication, a trait that had served him well over his 34 years. But now, he wondered if he needed to adapt his approach. "Oh, honey," she responded, "we both love you and understand. I do wish you were more involved with the family, though. I know this is temporary, and it's reassuring to hear you acknowledge it." Her eyes seemed to well up with tears. Bob couldn't help but wonder, was she genuinely moved, or was this just an act? "So, what does finishing the project early mean for you?" she asked, unpacking the Chinese food. Bob explained, "Firstly, it means a significant bonus. I don't know the exact amount yet, but it's substantial. Successfully handling our first government contract should also bring more business to the company. And with my name in the lead, it might attract attention from government recruiters. This could give me leverage for better opportunities, assuming all goes well." He attempted to eat his sweet and sour pork with chopsticks, but eventually switched to a fork for efficiency. "Didn't I mention all this before?" he asked, mid-bite. She shook her head. "No, you just said it was a big, confidential contract. I feel like we haven't really talked much since then," she said, her expression turning somber but then brightening. "But soon, I'll have you back." Bob decided to probe a little. "What bar are you ladies visiting tomorrow night? Should I swing by after work to check if you're all okay to drive?" She hesitated. "We're going to the Red Horse Saloon for line dancing, but I think we'll be done before you're off work," she said, avoiding eye contact. Bob felt a pang of heartache at her response. At that moment, Casey finished her egg roll and asked for a bedtime story. Bob cleaned up quickly and spent the next hour reading to his daughter, cherishing the family moment. His wife dozed off on the sofa, her book fallen in her lap. After carrying Casey to bed and tucking her in, he felt tears welling up. He hoped his daughter would remember these peaceful family nights, fearing the tough times that seemed inevitable in the days ahead. Brushing away his tears, Bob quietly made his way downstairs to where his wife was sleeping on the couch. He gently kissed her on the lips and covered her with a blanket to keep her warm. Then, he went to search for her phone. He located it charging on the nightstand in their bedroom. Successfully unlocking it, he began to sift through her text messages, quickly finding what he was looking for. The text dated back about 3 months. Him, "Hey pretty lady, it was great seeing you and the girls out dancing last night." Her, "Yeah, it was fun. Bob works late on Thursdays, and the in-laws take care of our daughter, so we get some girl time." Him, "Your hubby's a good guy for letting you have some time out." Her, "Yes, he's wonderful." The initial weeks of text seemed innocuous. Then there was this conversation. Vicky had a serious talk with me about our lunch breaks. It annoyed me, but she's right. We shouldn't give people the wrong impression. We're just talking. There's nothing wrong with that. Vicky asked if Bob would be okay with our behavior, and that made me rethink things. I shouldn't be discussing my issues with another man. I'll try talking to Bob. I get it. But if you can't reach him, you know where to find me. I'll even treat you to dinner, just as friends. Bob couldn't recall Sharon attempting to discuss anything with him during that period, but he was preoccupied with finding a supplier for a specific stainless steel requirement. His focus was so intense that he might have missed her attempts to communicate. From what he could see, Sharon's messages didn't seem inappropriate, but the other man's intentions were clearly questionable. How could Sharon not recognize this? Curious, Bob scrolled further to read the next set of messages. You need to return those today. What are you talking about? You know exactly what I mean. My friends are upset with me, and I don't blame them. If Bob finds out about my behavior, he might leave me. So, you don't want me to show him the video? What video? You can't let anyone at work see that. Sam was there and recorded it on his phone. I'll make sure he deletes it. But you'll owe me. Fine. I can't lose Bob, especially after last night. What happened last night? That's really none of your business. Was he upset you came home late and had been drinking? No. Let's just say it was an exceptional night and leave it at that. So, dancing with me got you excited for your husband. He should be thanking me. Stop it. Last night was amazing because of the love Bob and I share. Now, please give me back what's mine and make sure that video is deleted. I sound terrible in that message. Bob deserves better than me. No, he's lucky to have you. He wasn't there to watch over you, right? I'm sure he's great, but you often go out alone. I don't need anyone to watch over me. Just be the friend you say you are and take care of this, please. Sorry. Of course, I'll help. And then you owe me that dinner. Just make sure no one sees that video, and I'll do whatever you ask. There were no messages until the previous Monday. I heard ladies' night was cancelled. How about that dinner? Not a good idea. Sorry. Come on, your husband will be at work and you're on your own. Let's have a night out, just as friends. We can chat like we used to in the cafeteria. Besides, you owe me. Okay, I'll meet you at the Red Horse at 8. Nope, let's meet at the TGIF in the Sheraton Hotel. They have great drink specials, and it's quieter. I'll get a room in case we drink too much. Alright, but this is just dinner between friends. And yes, I owe you for ensuring that video never saw the light of day. It's bad enough that people at work heard about it. Don't worry, I made sure Sam deleted the video. Something else will come up at work and everyone will forget about it. See you at 8. Bob felt a sinking sensation. His wife agreeing to meet another man at a hotel bar seemed like the tipping point of their marriage. The implication was clear, and he wondered how she couldn't see the potential consequences. Resigned, he closed the messages, replaced her phone, and went to bed, sleep eluding him. Thursday, Sharon descended the stairs in her little black dress, the one she usually wore for their date nights. She looked stunning, but her expression changed to shock upon seeing Bob home early. Bob, I didn't expect you home this early, she stammered, visibly unsettled. We need to talk, Sharon, Bob said, his voice devoid of emotion. This might be the most crucial conversation we ever have. Please sit down. She sat, appearing frightened, and reached for his hand, but he pulled away. I know there's no girls' night out tonight. I know about Luke Jonas, he began. Bob, please, let me explain, she started, but he cut her off, his fist slamming down on the table. Sharon, listen to me, he shouted. You don't get to talk until I'm finished. She recoiled, tears beginning to form, as Bob continued, his expression unreadable. As I was saying, I'm aware of your closeness with Luke during lunch. I've heard about your dancing at the Red Horse Saloon. It's come to my attention that you've been rather forward with him on the dance floor. I also suspect the only reason you were so affectionate with me 3 weeks ago was because of your excitement over him. Furthermore, I've learned about your plans for a dinner date with him tonight at a hotel, where it seems a room is booked. I'm not sure to what extent your relationship has progressed, but it's clear there are few boundaries left. He paused, visibly struggling to contain his anger. Sharon, you've kept things from me about Luke, about your provocative dancing. You weren't honest about your night out with the girls. Frankly, I'm exhausted and my trust in you is shattered. I'm starting to doubt whether this marriage is worth saving. Your actions suggest you don't care about it anymore. So, here are your 3 options. He raised a finger. First, you can leave and meet your friend. This choice means the end of our marriage. There's no turning back. Raising a second finger, he continued, second, we can spend the night talking, and you can try to convince me that our marriage is worth fighting for. I won't lie, it'll be tough because my trust is broken. But I do love you, and we have to consider our child. There's a 50-50 chance I'll agree to work on this. He raised a third finger. Third, you take me to meet him tonight. You tell him in front of me that it's over and he should never contact you again. Then, you let us talk privately. This shows me respect and commitment to our relationship. If nothing intimate has happened between you two, I'll commit fully to making things right. However, if it has, this is the only option that might save our marriage." She looked pale, her expression one of shock. "So, what's it going to be, Sharon? 0, 50, or 100%? What's your choice?" The question lingered in the air. Sharon seemed on the verge of tears as she finally looked up at me. "Bob, I'm really sorry about everything. I need to talk to you about it. But first, who should drive? Do you want to, or should I?" That response took me by surprise. I hadn't expected her to choose confronting the situation over avoiding it. I thought she would stay and try to justify her actions. Her decision to face things head-on did earn her some points, though we were still far from okay. I grabbed my keys and followed her to my car. Opening the door for her was a habit, and she seemed close to tears as she got in. As we left the driveway, she turned to me, her voice small and filled with regret. "I really messed things up, didn't I?" "Yes, Sharon, you really did," I said, focusing on the road. "What can I do to fix it?" she asked. "I had been thinking about this. First, we need complete honesty from now on. You need to be upfront about everything, even things you think I might not want to know. And you'll have to find a way to make me believe you. Rebuilding trust is on you. Another thing, he needs to be completely out of your life. If we're going to make this work, there's no contact with him, at work or anywhere else. If he's around, you leave or call me. No accepting anything from him, no interaction at all. Next, when we get back tonight, you're going to tell me everything, even the difficult stuff. I know I've been absorbed in my project, so I'll take some of the blame. If you've been feeling resentful, tell me. We need to address everything. And lastly, we need to start marriage counseling. If you want to choose the counselor, that's fine. Maybe Ron can recommend someone. But this depends on what you tell me tonight." As I finished, her phone beeped with a text. She glanced at it, turning even paler. "It's him, asking where I am," she whispered. I held out my hand for her phone, and she handed it over silently. I looked through her recent texts, noticing a new one from earlier today. It read, "Hey, got a room with a jacuzzi for tonight. Maybe we can relax after dinner. Don't forget your swimsuit." Her, "You can't persuade me to join you in a hot tub. I'm not bringing a swimsuit." Him, "Let's see how the evening goes. You tend to loosen up when you've had a bit to drink. Maybe a swimsuit won't be necessary." And then, more recently, him, "Where are you? I've got a glass of wine ready for you." I texted back, "Running late, but I've got a surprise for you." Him, "You decided to bring your swimsuit after all. Great." I handed the phone back to my wife. She read the messages and just lowered her head. "Do you realize these messages aren't helping your case? Just from today, it looks like you had plans beyond dinner with him. What else will I find if I look further back?" I said, knowing full well the extent of their exchanges. "Tell me, do you think your messages today were just friendly banter? Can you see how they've completely eroded my trust?" I heard her start to cry. "Bob, I promise, I only intended to have dinner with him. I never planned anything beyond that." I couldn't hide my disbelief. "Did you plan what happened a few weeks ago after a night out with him?" Her face went even paler. "Sharon, we're almost there. You might want to fix your makeup and prepare what you're going to say to Luke. And remember, don't accept that wine." She pulled down the visor and grabbed a tissue from the glove box, starting to compose herself. As she applied her mascara, her voice steadied. "Bob, I'm beginning to see how Luke might have been manipulating me. Hearing you put it into words. But how could I have been so blind? I'm not naive. I've dealt with more charming and sophisticated men than Luke. What was it about him that got under my skin? That's part of the reason I find it hard to trust what you say, Sharon. You're smart and beautiful, and it baffles me that you didn't see through this situation. It makes me wonder if, in some way, you were a willing participant in all this," I said. She seemed to regain some composure, her voice strengthening. "I realize now how wrong I was to behave recklessly at the bar and to lie about going to dinner with him tonight. It's no wonder you're upset and hurt. Okay, I've made a mess of things, and I need to figure out how to fix it. Thank you for giving me a chance," she said, attempting to kiss me. I turned my head, allowing the kiss to land on my cheek. I was far from ready to move past this. She looked surprised by my reaction. We usually were more affectionate. "What should I say to him?" she asked as we pulled into the restaurant parking lot. After parking the car, I faced her, my frustration evident. "What should you say?" "Sharon, our relationship is hanging by a thread because of what you've done with this guy. Our family is at stake here. You need to realize that. Then, say whatever you feel is necessary." She sat silently for a moment, then took a deep breath and opened the car door. As we walked towards the restaurant, she made a gesture to hold my arm. I didn't move away, but I wasn't receptive either. Entering the restaurant, we were greeted by a friendly hostess with auburn hair. "Welcome to TGI Fridays. Are there two in your party?" she inquired. Before I could respond, Sharon spoke up. "We're here to meet someone. They've already been seated," she said professionally. "Okay, feel free to look around," the hostess replied. I didn't know what the man looked like, so I followed Sharon. She nudged me and nodded towards the back of the restaurant, where a man sat near the door to the hotel, engrossed in his phone. She walked resolutely towards the table, stopping without taking a seat. He looked up, smiling broadly, but his expression changed when he saw me behind her. "Luke, this is my husband, Robert Morgan. We've had a discussion about our interactions, and I agree with his concerns. For the first time in our marriage, I've given Robert reason to question my loyalty. I intend to mend the trust I've broken by my involvement with you. From now on, I want no contact with you. Do not call, text, or try to communicate with me in any way. I recognize my role in letting things escalate to this point, and now I choose to end it. Robert is aware of everything that happened at the Red Horse Saloon. My focus now is to salvage my marriage, and part of that includes informing HR tomorrow about our situation. Any further attempts at communication will be reported as harassment. I'll be at the bar while Robert speaks with you. Turning away, she kissed me quickly before I could react, whispering an apology. I watched her head to the bar, impressed with how she handled the situation. Sitting across from the visibly unnerved man, I assessed him. Dark hair, slender, impeccably dressed. He wasn't bad looking, but I've never been one to judge men. He seemed about my height, although it was hard to tell as he was seated. His attention kept drifting to the glass of wine on the table, which seemed to confirm my suspicions. I decided to keep my cool, though improvising wasn't my strong suit. Thought your surprise would be her in a swimsuit, didn't you? I said, barely smiling. You really think she's told you everything? He replied smugly. Facing him, I felt in control. I've known her for 10 years, married for 8. I understand her better than a guy who's been around for a few months, I said, maintaining my smile. The waiter came by, and I ordered a double Johnny Walker Black on the rocks. He tried to maintain his smugness. She's very charming, he said, glancing again at the wine glass intended for her. Yes, she's a remarkable woman, I replied with a genuine smile. But I doubt you're speaking from personal experience. He half laughed. Want proof? I realized he was trying to provoke me, but instead, I found myself chuckling. You don't have any proof. If things had gone that far, there'd be no reason for you to resort to underhanded tactics. What's your method? Trying to impair judgment to take advantage. I was guessing, but his shocked expression confirmed my suspicions. He recoiled as I leaned in. Anger surged within me. You've crossed a line. I should confront you physically right now, but I won't. That's not the solution. Instead, you have 3 choices. I pointed a finger close to his face. First, you leave. Apologize to my wife, resign from your job, and I won't pursue this further. Then you leave town. I raised a second finger. Second, you go to the authorities and confess your actions. Accept the consequences and stay away from my wife. I'll keep an eye on you, but that's it. Then you leave town. I raised the third finger. Third, we settle this in a controlled environment. We sign up for a boxing match with personal injury waivers. We face off in the ring. After that, regardless of the outcome, you leave my wife alone. Then you leave town. As the waiter brought my scotch, he sneered. Why would I agree to any of that? I replied with a stern look. Because the alternative is living in constant fear, wondering if every shadow hides a threat, if every unfamiliar noise is someone coming for you. It's about avoiding a life of looking over your shoulder, worrying about retribution for your actions. My tone was calm but firm, emphasizing the gravity of the situation and the seriousness of my words. You're bluffing. You're too gentle, at least that's what your wife said, he retorted, trying to regain his composure. I sipped my scotch, subtly activating the voice recording on my phone from my pocket. I hoped it would capture our conversation. You were planning something terrible tonight. Do you really want to test my resolve? He grew bolder. The plan was just to set the mood. It was going to be a wild night. Hearing this, my calmness shattered. In a swift move, I grabbed his collar and pulled him closer, managing to land a punch. His nose crunched under my fist. You'll regret this. I'm calling the police, he yelled, holding his nose. Go ahead. The police will be interested in the wine and my recording of your confession, I retorted. Soon, the police arrived, responding to the disturbance. 2 state troopers, who were nearby, took my statement. They collected the wine glass for testing and found a packet of white powder on him. He clammed up and asked for a lawyer. The officers listened to my recording, which, though faint, captured his incriminating admission. It was almost 4 a.m. by the time Sharon and I left the police station. After her statement, one of the officers praised me for preventing a dangerous situation. Sharon was visibly shaken. Luke was kept in custody. We managed to call my parents from her phone to explain the situation. They agreed to look after Casey and even planned to take her to the zoo. Back at home, we sat in the car in silence. She unbuckled her seatbelt and leaned over to hug me. I allowed her to cry on my shoulder for a moment before gently pushing her away. Sharon, we need to have a serious talk, but it's late. Let's go to bed for now. Tomorrow, we'll both take the day off work and spend it together, figuring out our next steps. Does that sound okay? Yes, Bob, going to bed sounds good, she replied. In a soft voice, she asked, can I sleep in the bed with you? Of course. The next morning, I woke up close to her, reflecting on the previous night's events and considering the possibility of things getting better between us. Yet, I knew there were still important discussions to be had before making any commitments. She moved my hand to her chest, but I quickly realized I wasn't ready for any intimacy. I gently encouraged her to get up, suggesting we shouldn't start our day with a heavy conversation on an empty stomach. We took a quick shower together, keeping it strictly functional. I knew we needed to talk things through before getting physically close again. Over breakfast, we kept the conversation light, discussing Grace and her time with my parents. Afterward, we headed home. Sitting at the kitchen table, I initiated the discussion. I won't dwell on Luke's character, that's clear now. He claimed you were intimate with him and referred to me in a demeaning way. Is that true? No, she exclaimed. The extent of my involvement with him was that regrettable night at the Red Horse. It never went any further. But how can I believe you? You lied about seeing him last night and about what happened at the bar. We need to lay everything out here. She seemed to have been thinking this through. What about a polygraph test? She suggested. A polygraph test? I couldn't help but smile a bit at her proposal. You mean a lie detector test? She nodded eagerly. Yes, I'll take a polygraph test. Just set it up, and you can ask me anything, she said with a sincere expression that I couldn't help but find endearing. I knew polygraph tests weren't entirely reliable, but it would be a step towards understanding the truth. I'll look into arranging it. It might take some time, but it's a good idea, I responded. She smiled, relieved. Okay, that's a good start. We'll discuss the details of what happened between you and Luke later. The most important question for me is how we move forward. I understand why you might have kept quiet about the incident at the bar, though I don't like it. I can somewhat grasp why you might have gotten close to another man if it seemed like just a work friendship. But what I can't comprehend, and what hurts the most, is the lie about going out with the girls when you were actually meeting him. That direct lie broke my heart, I said, my voice shaking. Bob, I'm so sorry for lying. When you took on your project, I felt neglected for the first time in our relationship. I'm not blaming you, I'm just explaining how I felt, she started. Vicky's sister suggested looking for romance elsewhere. I didn't interpret that as cheating, but more like seeking attention elsewhere. That's where Luke came in. He made me feel special, asking about my day, my family, my hobbies. It was all about me. She paused, gauging my reaction. When Vicky pointed out how it looked, I realized I was using Luke as a substitute for what I felt I was missing from you. I did try to distance myself after that. The night everything escalated, Luke and his friends arrived before the girls. He was buying drinks, and I ended up more inebriated than I've been in years. I did things I'm ashamed of, which you know about. But then, being with you afterwards was so different, and it left me even more confused about my feelings and actions. She stood up to get a glass of water, drinking half before sitting back down. She resumed her explanation. I was in damage control mode. I knew you'd be upset about what happened, and rightly so. If the roles were reversed, I'd be furious. And after our intense time together, I knew you'd have doubts about my feelings. So, I made another mistake. I used Luke to try and cover things up. He knew about it and reminded me of that favor. So, there I was, owing something to Luke, and he wanted to take me to dinner when my usual friends weren't available. I felt lonely and made a thoughtless decision. I'm deeply sorry. Our relationship was always built on trust, and I damaged that. She was crying quietly by now. I couldn't just sit there. I got up, X'd her in the face, and left. I knew I had to say something. You need to go, we can't repair this. Epilogue. I took up boxing. The project I worked on was completed ahead of schedule and under budget, elevating my company in government contracting. I was offered a VP role but declined due to the travel involved. Instead, I now lead a special projects division. I ended up with a misdemeanor assault charge for my altercation with Luke, resulting in a fine of $300 and 40 hours of community service. It felt like a small price to pay. Luke received a 3 to 5 year sentence for attempted assault and possession of a controlled X. He also experienced some rough justice outside the court. One night, he was attacked while walking to his car. No, I wasn't involved. It seems Luke had a history of using meds to manipulate situation, and he finally crossed paths with someone seeking retribution for a past victim. That individual received a 2 to 3 year sentence for his actions. Out of a sense of solidarity, I contribute $50 monthly to his prison commissary account. My comment: you don't give her choices, she's already made her choices. She engaged in dating behavior and opened her heart to another man. She already ended the marriage.